YouTube, how are you now? So after a very long break from Modern Warfare 2, I decided to come back one last time to check out the hunting event to see if anything had changed since the last time I played so I could give my final thoughts on the game. Obviously this is going to be highly subjective and these are just going to be my opinions, which you may disagree with, and that's totally fine. I just want to share my experience. So I actually ended up playing more during this event than I did during the entirety of this whole last year since the game first released. This just goes to show how much a difference the matchmaking can make on my gameplay enjoyment. The matchmaking at launch was insufferable. I hated it. It has definitely gotten better, but it's still too strict in my opinion. I still have bad games, but I also have good games now, and the good games seem to outnumber the bad, so it's at least tolerable for me currently. I wouldn't say it's enjoyable, but it's definitely not nearly as bad as it was in the beginning. The main driving factor for me playing so much was to unlock the new ghoulie camo from the hunting, so I could use it in Modern Warfare 3 since everything from Modern Warfare 2 will carry over to the new game. It was a bit of a grind, being that it required collecting 1,000 souls, and you could only collect up to 20 souls per game, so at minimum it would take at least 50 games to unlock. Which is quite a bit. So if the matchmaking was as bad as it was at launch, there's no way I would have been able to get through the 50 games. But after a good amount of playtime, I just wanted to share my final thoughts on the game, what I liked, what I didn't like, and what I would like to see moving forward. So the gunplay in Modern Warfare 2 is very good. I've always been a fan of Infinity Ward's gunplay, and this game is no exception. The look and feel of the weapons is just top notch, and shooting enemies feels very satisfying. I honestly think it's one of the best, if not the best, in the industry. It really is their secret sauce. It's just unfortunate that it's being held hostage by a stubborn design philosophy that I do not agree with at all, but we'll get more into that later. Let's just say the gunplay is the best thing they've got going for them, and maybe the only thing they've got going for them at this point, and leave it at that. The game modes. So Modern Warfare 2 definitely had a large selection of different game modes, from traditional multiplayer offerings to ground war and Warzone 2.0, to new modes like third person, invasion, and DMZ. Now, not all of these modes were necessarily executed well, and Infinity Ward's support for some of these modes throughout the year was severely lacking, if not completely non-existent. But the sheer variety they had on offer was definitely a plus. It's true the game launched without staple hardcore mode and instead had a fall substitute tier 1 version, which definitely didn't replace hardcore, but hardcore eventually came back after enough player feedback. And even though I didn't play the majority of these modes, it was nice to see Infinity Ward trying new things and branching out with new ideas, even if they didn't always resonate with the players. I think Invasion was probably the best addition for me personally, as it was pretty much the only mode I played. It wasn't perfect, and AI bots mixed with real players are both a positive and negative at the same time in my opinion, but it was the only mode I could tolerate for an extended period of time. I also played a little bit of DMZ in the beginning, as I thought it had quite a bit of unrealized potential, but unfortunately that potential was never realized throughout the game's life cycle, so I didn't play too much. I also would have preferred that mode to have a solo only queue, as I'm primarily a solo player. Either that or just being able to play against AI bots would have been more enjoyable for me. I would actually much prefer being able to play against AI bots in every mode to avoid their strict matchmaking. Kind of like how Battlefield 2042 has offline mode with limited progression. Even if it's only like half XP, I'd like the option to be able to just level up weapons against AI bots and not have to try my hardest every game against real players. Weapon selection. Modern Warfare 2 had a ton of different weapons to choose from, especially after a year's worth of seasonal content being added. That's always a good thing. A lot of the classics were there to fit most every playstyle, and customization of each weapon was pretty nuts. I wasn't necessarily a fan of the gunsmiths this year, as it seemed a bit too complicated in how they handled leveling up and unlocking different attachments by using different weapons, and I wasn't really a fan of the ambiguity of weapon tuning either. There was no real way of knowing how much you were buffing or nerfing certain aspects of your weapon with the attachments you were selecting or tuning. other than having to test those stats yourself or go to resources outside the game that carried out those meticulous tests themselves and post their results. Simplicity can go a long way, and complexity for the sake of complexity doesn't really add anything positive, as was the case with the gunsmith this year. Having to level up a shotgun to unlock a laser for my SMG or sniper just doesn't really make any sense to me. It was nice that unlocking attachments once unlocked them across the board for every weapon, but I'd rather the developers just go back to the old concept of leveling up a weapon unlocks attachments for that specific weapon, although maybe make the unlocks faster or more frequent than it was in previous years. Graphics, animations. So the graphics and animations in Modern Warfare 2 were very well done as well. I like the more realistic modern military setting, and the quality of the animations in this game were top-notch yet again. I don't think all the animations were necessary, and some actually negatively impacted the gameplay for me, but the quality of the graphics and animations was superb. I also think a lot of the cosmetics added to the game over the course of the year were pretty good as well. There were a few that went a little too far off the rails of realism, breaking the immersion for me personally, but that seems to be the case with every Call of Duty title. It's not really that big of a deal to me either. I do think a lot of the animations in this game were either too slow or completely unnecessary and detracted from the gameplay experience, but I think that was intentional on the part of the devs to slow down the game to be more tactical, realistic, which I didn't like. Moving your character felt like moving a brick sometimes, and it's not really the feel you want when you're supposed to be controlling a special operations high-level operator, you know? I also felt like smoke and particle effects were way too inconsistent, and that one player had a ton of smoke on their screen and couldn't see the enemy player, whereas the other player had no smoke on their screen and could see the first player clear as day. I'm all for visual effects that make the game look cool and add immersion, but not at the cost of gameplay balance. They create an unfair situation between two opposing players, giving one an advantage and putting the other at a disadvantage that shouldn't be in the game at all. So those were the things I liked about Modern Warfare 2 that I think they did well, but even the good things I liked had caveats I didn't like, so let's dive into the things I didn't like at all. So intentional design decisions. Infinity Ward was very clear in the marketing for Modern Warfare 2 that they were trying to slow the game down to be more tactical, realistic, and although they stated they were making the game suitable for every playstyle, it was clear they were heavily favoring a more passive, campy playstyle in how they implemented a lot of the gameplay mechanics. They even went so far as to try to rebrand corner campers as Sentinels. Like changing the name somehow makes that style of play less annoying and frustrating to deal with. So camping has always been an issue in Call of Duty, and many past titles made attempts to make camping less viable, but at the end of the day there will always be campers in Call of Duty games because it offers clear advantages, relying on the element of surprise. So it's not going to go away, but encouraging and even rewarding that kind of tactic was the wrong move in my opinion, but Infinity Ward put all their eggs in that basket for some reason, and I didn't like that at all. Loud footsteps with no footstep dampening perk, dead silence as a chargeable equipment that you can only use very briefly and then have to charge again, on top of pinging loudly every time you activate it, just gave every advantage to a player sitting in a corner not moving, and every disadvantage to players who wanted to move around the maps. Mounting on windows or cover to drastically reduce recoil is another mechanic I'm not a fan of, as it further encourages passive holding angles and lanes. A player mounted on a head glitch is going to win against a player running around a corner into the mounted player's sights the vast majority of times. There were just too many doors, windows, and head glitches that gave every advantage to campers. That's why most of my games were full of campers just sniping from spawn or team camping every building and every room imaginable. It's not a fun experience when a majority of players play that way, but when the game rewards that specific style of play while also severely punishing any aggressive players trying to move around the maps, that's just the way it's going to be. A couple campers each game is to be expected, but almost the entire lobby camping with games going to time is just bad gameplay design in my opinion. Imagine if every player played that way. Nobody would move, so nobody would get any kills. What kind of game would that be? Killstreaks only further exacerbated the camping problem by rewarding it even more. A player could sit in the back of their spawn all game sniping, and as long as they got enough kills to earn a kill streak, they could get even more free kills. So instead of getting maybe 8, 10, 12 kills per game, which would very clearly show a campy playstyle, they could get 20 kills or more, so long as they didn't die and got a VTOL, a chopper gunner, a gunship, whatever. So kill streaks have always incentivized more passive, careful play. Even when I'm close to getting a kill streak, I will play more passive and careful so I can get and use that kill streak, as opposed to risking dying in an aggressive fight and losing all progress on that streak and having to start over. Kill streaks by their nature reward not dying, so prioritizing not dying over getting kills leads to more passive play. I don't necessarily dislike kill streaks in concept, as they're a staple of Call of Duty and have been since the beginning, but with everything else in this game encouraging and even rewarding camping, I just feel like kill streaks are the icing on the cake for campers. Everything about this game rewards taking no risks, whereas taking risks almost always puts players at a huge disadvantage. This is not good gameplay design in my opinion. Join in progress and disbanding lobbies. So join in progress and disbanding lobbies rears its ugly head yet again in Modern Warfare 2. You can have one or the other, but you can't have both. I have no problem joining in progress so long as lobbies don't disband, because as long as you stay in that lobby, you can get fresh games over and over again, so long as the lobby stays together. I'm not a fan of disbanding lobbies, but you can have disbanding lobbies so long as you don't have join in progress, at least past a certain point, or at least with the option to opt out of join in progress. I would much rather wait a little longer in matchmaking than join a game that's half to two-thirds over already, only for the lobby to disband and go back to matchmaking again. I actually stopped playing free-for-all, which was the only traditional multiplayer mode I could tolerate due to join in progress. What point is there in joining a game where the first place player has 23 out of 30 kills already? I'm somehow expected to get 30 kills faster than they can get another 7 kills, when they probably already have kill streaks going and I have nothing? This type of situation wasn't a one-off either. It happens so frequently that I just stopped playing the mode altogether. I will join in progress only for the lobby to disband afterwards, go back to matchmaking, only to join in progress again, and keep repeating the process over and over. It literally makes no sense having both, as it completely destroys the fundamental gameplay loop. This problem is probably not nearly as pervasive for the average majority of players because they represent the largest pool of players and available games to choose from, but as you move into the much smaller population pools, such as above average players, this becomes a far too common occurrence. It really is a game-breaking design flaw and shouldn't be allowed. Why should certain players who paid full price for the same game have to deal with a significantly worse experience than the majority of your player base just because they're good at the game? I can completely understand wanting the majority of your player base to be happy and catering to them from a business perspective, but not at the intentional expense of other paying customers who just don't happen to be part of that majority. That's just plain shady. And that's not even mentioning the common lost connection to host server game crashes that don't even save any progress. They're not as bad when they happen at the start of the game, but they mostly happen to me when the games had ended or were very close to the end. So wasting 15 to 20 minutes a game that just disregarded any progress I made on weapons, challenges, or the battle pass makes me not want to play anymore, especially when it happens fairly often. One time it happened 3 games in a row, which made me think it was my connection, but my connection was fine and every other game worked fine. It was just this game, so I don't expect crashes to never happen, but when they happen as often as they do in Modern Warfare 2, there should be some type of save intervals throughout each match to mitigate the losses of time spent and progress made. Matchmaking. Whether it's skill-based matchmaking or engagement-optimized matchmaking or some combination of the two or something completely different, the matchmaking in Modern Warfare 2 is way too strict and punishing and completely kills any enjoyment for me. I'm not against skill matching in ranked modes, where skill levels are shown and higher ranks are the rewards for harder lobbies. I'm even for skill matching for new players and far below average skill players as well, as this type of skill matching has always been in Call of Duty from the beginning. I mean, games should absolutely protect new players who are trying to learn the game so that they stick around long enough to become consistent return players. If they're brand new to the game and don't know how to play, and are matched against players who do know how to play, not going to have a good time, and will probably quit before taking the time to learn and get good enough to enjoy the game with and against the majority of players. Far below average skill players should also be protected with the option to play against the majority if they prefer, because they also would have a bad time against the average majority who all represent a higher skill level. People with disabilities and or handicaps, or even just players who aren't that good at video games. Maybe they've never used a controller before or don't have good hand-eye coordination. These types of players would have a very hard time against even the majority of average casual players, so they should absolutely continue to have their own protected bracket if they so choose. When I first switched from controller to mouse and keyboard, I would have absolutely benefited from that protected bracket. I was terrible on mouse and keyboard for the first couple weeks, and wouldn't have been able to kill any real players in any competitive shooters unless they were away from keyboard. I had to practice offline against AI bots quite a bit just to get the basics of aiming and movement down without having to think too much about each action and what I was doing. I got better over time, but if I had to play against online real players during that time, my progress would have been very slow and very frustrating. So I'm not against skill matching in certain situations, but I am very much against skill matching in public matches for the majority of players when there's literally nothing to show for improving or getting better at the game, let alone being good at the game. If the only rewards in the game are kills and wins, one would expect above average players to have more kills and wins, below average players to have less kills and wins, and average players to have average kills and wins. That's what makes sense, and that is the point of competitive online multiplayer. The better you get, the better you perform. Otherwise, there's no incentive for getting better or even playing at all. Why would anyone want to play a game that simply gets harder as you get better with nothing to show for it? Why would anyone care about stats like kills, wins, kill death ratio, score per minute, kills per game, etc., when they literally mean nothing because the baseline isn't the same for every player? If the starting baseline is different for every player based on skill level, but that's kept hidden from the players, none of those stats matter. The only stat that does matter then is the matchmaking rating, which is intentionally hidden because that's the only way a system like this can work. It is built entirely on deception and manipulation, tricking the vast majority of players into thinking they're better at the game than they really are by protecting them from better players always, all in the hopes of getting them to play more with the ultimate end goal of them spending money. This makes sense from a business perspective. If you can get the vast majority of players to spend money, you're probably going to make more money than focusing on smaller minorities of players, but the way they go about it is completely dishonest and comes at the direct expense of other paying customers through no fault of their own, without their knowledge or consent. And there's longer matchmaking times as well. Inconsistent connection quality, as the best possible connections are often sacrificed to find better skill matches. Cheaters being far more prevalent in higher skill lobbies, as they are sectioned off from the average majority due to their better, albeit cheated, performance. On top of having to deal with all that, I've actually been kicked from my very best games where I hadn't died once, had gotten all my high level kill streaks early in the game and started raining down terror on the lobby with those kill streaks, only to get kicked with the player kicked message. This has only happened a handful of times, but they were all during the best games I've ever had, so I'm not even allowed to have my best games, on top of being punished in every way possible for being good at the game. Then there's team balancing. Not only is there matchmaking based on skill, but there's also team balancing on top of this. Team balancing is somewhat required to a degree in any multiplayer environment, but again, the current implementation is terrible. The developers are trying to make each game as close to 50-50 odds as possible, but in reality, the only team balancing that should be required is to try to prevent blowouts. Blowouts generally aren't fun, especially on the losing end, and most players would probably prefer closer games, but it doesn't always need to be as close to 50-50 odds as possible. This method often leads to blowouts because it groups the worst players in the lobby with the best player, leaving the remaining middle of the pack players on the opposing team. This forces the best player to have to play at their highest potential just to have a shot at winning. And this also puts the worst players at a huge disadvantage because literally every other player on the opposing team is higher skilled than them, meaning they won't be able to contribute much to the team and will have a bad time. If the best player can somehow manage to have a great game but still ends up losing, that's not a good experience either. Having the game stack the odds against you never feels good, and sometimes those odds seem so insurmountable, it makes playing the game seem pointless. Team balancing should simply try to split up different skill levels on different teams. Split up the best players, split up the worst players, and have a good mix of average on both teams so every player has someone on the opposing team they can somewhat evenly match up with and be able to contribute in some way while also having fun. I know this isn't always possible with pre-made groups and varying skill players representing different lobbies, but it should be a lot more like a schoolyard pick rather than a strict attempted 50-50 outcome. If the developers even knew how to balance exactly around 50-50 odds, which they clearly don't, as evidenced by the highly imbalanced games that are so common, it would require performing above expectations to win. If the game already expects the world from a good player, how are they supposed to perform above expectations to be able to win? If the game expects more from bad players, but stacks the odds against them so they can't do anything against the better players on the opposing team, how are they supposed to perform above expectation? It just doesn't make any sense the way it is currently implemented, and makes the game unenjoyable for both good and bad players. Games don't have to be super close as long as they're not complete blowouts. To a lesser degree, team balancing also seems to affect the difficulty of AI bots, at least in modes like Invasion that have them. The opposing team's bots seem to be on hardened or veteran difficulty, as they will instantly snap to and shoot at me. I've been killed by bots countless times playing Invasion, whereas my team's AI bots seem to be on recruit difficulty, as they often won't even shoot enemies right in front of them. This isn't that big of an issue, but it's just annoying dying to AI bots when I'm fighting real players, especially if I'm close to earning a kill streak. Meanwhile, I can be surrounded by teammate bots, and they don't even bother shooting enemies. They just stand there and watch me die, or even turn their backs to the enemy players for easy kills, whereas enemy bots will do instant 180s and start shooting me even though they never had a line of sight on my position. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal, but still annoyance. And then netcode and time to kill versus time to death. So the netcode in this game can be very bad at times. It's not every game, but it's frequent enough to be a consistent problem. Not having the best connection matches possible due to skill-based matchmaking definitely compounds this issue, but lag compensation is a problem as well. Lag compensation is necessary to a degree in any online environment, but it is far too lenient in Modern Warfare 2. I've been killed around corners after completely getting behind cover countless times. The kill cams show the enemy player shooting where I was a good half second earlier than where I was on my screen. That's far too lenient for a Twitch shooter where time to kill is usually sub 200 milliseconds and just feels terrible to die to. What's the point of getting behind cover for safety if the enemy can just shoot where you were previously and still kill you? Obviously, this is always going to be a problem to some degree in online multiplayer, but it is a much bigger problem than it should be in this game. Time to kill versus time to death can feel very inconsistent as well. Killing an enemy player takes the normal number of shots, but dying feels instant a lot of times. There are countless times where I was shooting an enemy player and the shot I fired that should have killed them seemed to ricochet back and kill me instead. Watching their kill cam perspective showed them taking damage before even reacting, let alone starting to shoot back, but somehow they stopped taking damage and were able to return fire and kill me in an instant, all while still shooting directly at them. I know kill cams can't be trusted as they're not one-to-one duplications of what actually happened. They're just server recreations of what it thinks happened, but what happened on my screen made no sense, and what happened on the kill cam made no sense either. Maybe the enemy player saw and shot me first on their screen, but if that's the case, the servers are terrible at showing me what's happening in real time, as on my screen I shot first, should have gotten the kill before they even started returning fire, but somehow died from the last bullet I fired, which should have killed them, but ricocheted back and killed me. And the worst part about it is that it most often happens right before I'm about to unlock a high-level kill streak. So instead of getting the kill I should have gotten easily and earning a kill streak, I die in what appears to be a completely bogus fashion. Nobody likes feeling cheated, let alone cheated of a high-level kill streak, but that happens far too frequently in this game. Then there's the wacky aim assist, or what I like to call aim hinder. There have been times where I literally couldn't aim my reticle at an enemy player. The game was literally pulling my aim off the enemy in a very obvious manner, and I'm on mouse and keyboard, so that shouldn't be ever happening. And even when I managed to get my bullets to cross through the enemy's body, I wouldn't get any hits at all. So I was sure these players were cheating, as it happened multiple times throughout the match, but the end of round screen showed those players were the bottom players with a very negative KD, and that even with the few times they were able to kill me, as I couldn't kill them. So I was at the top of the leaderboard each time, so this leads me to believe there is actually an aim hinder mechanic in the game that tries to make each gunfight closer to 50-50 odds. It's only super obvious when the discrepancy in odds is high, but I would imagine it's implemented quite frequently in more subtle, less obvious ways when the odds are closer. It honestly just feels like the developers are trying to manipulate anything and everything they can behind the scenes to achieve their desired goals of fairness or engagement, whatever those may be. Even if that's not the case, not being able to trust them enough not to do these types of things is a serious problem for their reputation and image. I don't trust Infinity Ward to not engage in these manipulative practices, and I don't trust them to implement these mechanics or algorithms properly to begin with. They shouldn't be in the game at all, because if you have to keep them hidden, you already know they're not good for the game or the players from the start. If the developers actually believed in these systems as being right for the game and the best for players, they would be open and honest about it, but they know that's not the case. They know it can only work through intentional deceit and manipulation because the end goal is addiction, not enjoyment. They don't care if you hate the game and are miserable playing it, so long as you keep playing it because you're addicted and can't quit. If you're addicted, chances are you'll spend money, and that's all they care about, and it couldn't be more obvious. It's not even a game we all play anymore, it's a game that plays us. It's just a shell of what could be an amazing game built to provide microtransactions and methods of monetization. It truly is a shame what modern day so-called AAA gaming has become. Then there's the Battle Pass. While I like the concept of the Battle Pass in general, allowing players a way to access new content for free by playing the game, I don't like the current implementation. Grinding the game for free unlocks is fine, but if I buy the Battle Pass, I shouldn't also have to grind the game to unlock the new weapons introduced that season, which is all I'm interested in anyway. I don't really care about the cosmetics, so grinding those out is fine by me, but having to pay money and grind the game just to be able to use the new weapons makes me not want to play. Buying the Battle Pass should automatically unlock the new weapons for use, and then if you want to grind for the cosmetic items, feel free. But again, it comes back to the greedy monetization practices. The publishers and developers know certain players will spend a ton of money to unlock new content right away, so they gatekeep the new weapons behind paywalls at every corner. Even if you buy the Black Cell upgraded Battle Pass for $30, you can only potentially unlock one new weapon with the 20 tier skips that come with it. You would need another 20 tier skips to be able to unlock the other new weapon, which would cost you another $20. So $50 to unlock the 2 new weapons each season right away. That's ridiculous. $10 to buy the Battle Pass should be enough to unlock both weapons. But that's just not going to happen so long as greedy executives are behind the decision making and not people who actually care about the product and the paying customers who use said product. It's unfortunate how greedy these companies have become and how blatantly obvious they are about it with no repercussions. But as long as there are enough people spending that kind of money, it's not going to change. I would think the vast majority of players spending $10 each would net more money overall than chasing the few whales who are willing to spend the $50 plus each season on top of the $70 plus base price, but what do I know? This monetization is also even more heavily gated behind slow progression within the Battle Pass. The Haunting event had double Battle Pass XP for a few days, so that was nice, but when it was over, the progress was very slow. Double Battle Pass XP should be the base for progress, because with that I was able to get a token or one tier about once per game. As it stands right now, Battle Pass progression is way too slow, and that's done on purpose, obviously, to push players to spend money to avoid the grind. I'm the type of person who would rather just not play to avoid the grind than spend money, so if there are enough players like me, hopefully it backfires on them in the near future and forces change, but we'll just have to wait and see. Then there's Warzone 2.0. Granted, I didn't play much Warzone, but that's because I didn't enjoy it. I played quite a bit of the original Warzone on Verdansk, even though it had some of the same issues I don't like about Warzone 2, but this Warzone seemed to double down on the bad and remove a lot of the good of the original. The main issue I have with this Warzone in general, even the original, is that I don't believe it's a true battle royale experience. There aren't any real stakes in the game like most other BRs until the very end of the match, and a lot of that is intentional by design. Burst self revives are the worst. They're far too common and far too fast to implement. You pretty much have to thirst every down because otherwise there's a very good chance they'll be back in the fight in 5 seconds flat, while you're focusing on their teammates or other enemies. It used to be that getting downed was an extreme disadvantage for your team, and your teammates had to decide whether to let you die and be down a player and at a numbers disadvantage for the rest of the game, or risk their own lives dealing with the players who downed you to try and save you. A lot of players would even keep down players alive to use as bait to try and draw out the rest of the enemy team. That doesn't exist in Warzone at all. Even if you don't have a self-revive, your team can let you die with no real consequences. You have the gulag on your first death, and you also have team buybacks at buy stations so long as your team has enough money and there are buy stations remaining in the game. Players can come back over and over throughout the match, which completely removes any real stakes from the game until that is no longer possible. Even in Apex Legends, where you can bring back fully dead teammates, you have to at least risk your own neck to retrieve their tag from their death box, where they died, within a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you can no longer bring them back that match. There's risk reward to it, whereas in Warzone, there's no risk required. Just run away to safety and buy them back at a buy station. Battle Royales are supposed to be one life only modes with high stakes and high payoffs, but Warzone is just a respawn mode with more steps, and the only real stakes and intensity come at the very end of each match. And that's not even getting into a lot of the new problems Warzone 2 introduced, like AI bots being a nuisance and even a detriment with no real purpose, and the new inventory system with different armor levels and backpacks that could hold multiple self-revives and killstreaks in the early days. The developers ended up walking back and even removing a lot of contentious additions throughout the game's lifecycle, but the fact that a lot of those things even got past brainstorming sessions without anyone, seeing a potential problem with them, let alone went through design and testing and made it all the way into the final product, is baffling for a multi-billion-dollar AAA studio. It makes me question whether the people making the decisions even play games or know anything about gaming at all, but rather just see games as potential opportunities to make some more money. But yeah, I could go on and on forever on the problems with modern day gaming in general that are also prevalent in this game, but suffice it to say I'm not a fan of Modern Warfare 2. I no longer hate it, as it has improved for me personally since launch, but I still don't like it or enjoy it either. The gunplay and modern military setting are really the only redeeming qualities for me, whereas everything else about the game ranges from being just barely tolerable to a complete slap in the face to players like me who have been with the franchise since the beginning and have gotten good at the game. I still wouldn't recommend this game even after all the changes Infinity Ward has made, and I don't think I'll be supporting any more Infinity Ward Call of Duties in the future unless they do a complete 180 on their overall design philosophy, which I do not like. It really is a shame that such high quality gunplay, graphics, animation, and art style are all stuck behind so many design decisions that I can't stand, and are essentially being held hostage by a stubborn studio, completely unwilling to budge on anything. They clearly think they know better than everyone else, and there's no convincing them otherwise. That's the most infuriating part for me. It's one thing to try out new ideas, it's another thing to try to reinvent the wheel and throw away what has worked for so long prior, only to never back down, no matter how much resistance you face. It's okay to fail. Not every idea will turn out to be a success, but failure to Infinity Ward is something they're not even willing to consider, let alone admit. They're right no matter what. Everyone else has to be wrong. Too bad, because there's so much obvious talent within the studio. Modern Warfare 2 had so much potential. Its solid gunplay could have carried it to greatness if the developers hadn't forcefully implemented so many of their undesired design decisions. It still could have been great if they were willing to admit some of those design decisions may not have been the best for the game, or compromised even a little bit with what the Call of Duty community was asking for, but that's just not the case. I can't judge the game on what it could have been. I can only judge the game for what it is, and what it is not a game I like. If you liked it, that's great. There are obviously enough people who did enjoy the game for it to continue making a ton of money for Activision, but otherwise changes would have come a lot sooner. Design philosophy goes out the window if it affects the bottom line, for sure. But apparently enough players didn't like the game, since they are reverting a lot of the contentious changes that were made in Modern Warfare 2 in the coming Modern Warfare 3. But maybe that's just Sledgehammer Games agreeing with the players and not Activision forcing their hand. Who knows? All I do know is I didn't enjoy Modern Warfare 2, as I'm not a fan of Infinity Ward's overall design philosophy and the strict skill matching that was introduced in Modern Warfare 2019 and has been in Call of Duty ever since. I'd rather just play against AI bots, because then I could at least just enjoy the gunplay and modern setting and graphics. I just don't see the point in online multiplayer anymore when there's so much manipulation going on behind the scenes. I would much rather my success or failure be decided by my performance, not by some hidden algorithms working behind the scenes, in ways completely unknown to me or anyone else playing. I want to play against other players, not to have to play against the game itself, while also playing against other players. But yeah. Those are my thoughts on Modern Warfare 2 in a nutshell. Let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree, and if you disagree, why. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace. Well, turns out the audio on this recording is seriously scuffed, so I'm just gonna provide commentary over the remaining gameplay so it's not assaulting your eardrums. The sound is really bad for whatever reason. So yeah, I think this game was my best game. I think I went like 69-2, which is the most kills I've gotten in the best, well, not the best kill death ratio, because I went 44-1 one game, but I had quite a few good games during this haunting event. 60-4, a bunch of 50+ kill games, so like 54-4, 50-4. Quite a few 40+ kill games with high kill death ratio as well, so like the 44-1. 44 KD was the highest KD, but like I said earlier, the best games that I had potentially, which could have been like the best games ever, I got kicked while I was using my Killstreaks, because I unlocked all the Killstreaks, so all the way up to the gunship, the VTOL, the chopper gunner, and the gunship early in the game, so potentially I could have just died and re-earned all those kill streaks and used them again. So I mean, that could have been 100+ kills easily, but kicked me from the game for whatever reason. No explanation, just said message player kicked, and that was it. So I would assume it's because I was doing too well. Maybe it got reported too many times by too many people, who knows, but it just sucks that it happened during the best games I had with the potential to be the best games ever, you know. So yeah, this one was 69-2. $34.5 KD, not bad. In this game, our team pushed the enemy team pretty much all the way back into their spawn, so we're pretty far in their spawn, just pushing the fights, trying to get kills, while all these bots come down at the same time. I like how the enemy bots know exactly where I am, though. Like, they come directly to me with no indicators for where I am. They have no line of sight on me, or they know exactly where I am and just start shooting me. Give away my position if I'm trying to flank, or kill me, like with shotgun insta shots, and even ARs, they mow me down, whereas my teammate II is pretty much worthless, won't even shoot enemies who are standing directly in front of them. Like, I went into a building once where a teammate AI was looking directly at an enemy, like facing directly towards him, but wasn't shooting at him, and he'd been sitting there for like a few seconds at least, so pretty terrible. Excuse me. Leads me to believe they have different difficulty AI bots depending on the team balancing, which is pretty stupid in my opinion, but not that big a deal. I don't really care. If only it was AI bots only, you know? I'd love Invasion or any of the game modes just against AI bots, you know, as long as there's some progress. So you can play offline against just bots, but you won't make any progress on unlocking weapons or challenges, unlocking attachments, anything like that. So be nice to have offline mode with limited progression, limited XP, like Battlefield 2042 has. Or even like Rainbow Six Siege has, like their terrorist hunt training grounds or whatever. You can just play each map against AI bots, whichever difficulty you select, and get some experience. You can still level up, unlock stuff, try out the guns, try out the operators, without having to play against real players, you know, because they use hidden MMR matchmaking as well. So even in their unranked modes, it makes sense in ranked mode, but doesn't make sense in unranked public matches where there's nothing to show for different skill levels having different difficulty in lobbies. That guy got wrecked. Holding his angles, man. Sentinel. A lot of sentinels in this game, you know? And it makes sense to play that way because the game rewards that style of play. So who wouldn't want the advantages, you know, if they're trying to win or they're trying to get kill streaks or trying to pad their stats? Play to the game's strength, you know? So even I would camp when I'm close to kill streaks and stuff, so it's not worth risking dying and losing your kill streak, having to start over. So definitely rewards that way of play, you know? So a lot of people play that way. It's just not that enjoyable when skill level is equalized and there's a bunch of campers too. Like, I don't mind campers of varying skill because I can usually outplay average players even if they're sitting in a corner hiding somewhere, but if they're around my skill level and they're hiding or mounted on some head glitch, have every advantage, they're probably going to win if our skill levels are fairly equal. Whereas if I'm just running around giving away my position with my loud footsteps, have no cover, running into their sights full sprint while they're ADS'd already and ready to fire, while I have to come out of sprint to fire and ADS and start shooting, not likely I'm gonna win that fight, you know? I didn't even touch on the change they made to the minimap, the traditional minimap where used to be shooting an unsuppressed weapon would show you as a red dot on the minimap, and only unsuppressed weapons keep you off, but that as well. Huh? There, that's the end of it.
Yeah, that was terrible. Terrible. This whole guy was cheating.